Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So warning, this video is going to be completely different from what I do usually on this YouTube channel. And honestly, it goes against every bone in my body, but I feel like we've been talking about the market and depressing news. So I decided to change it up a bit. So instead of talking about freight, brokers, shippers, what's going on with carrier capacity, today we're going to get personal. Now, if you're new to my channel, welcome. I teach about the trucking industry with a heavy focus on the spot market as well as freight market analysis. At least that's 99.9% of the time. Sometimes I make videos like these. So if this is a topic that interests you, feel free to subscribe and join an amazing community. So to be quite honest, as I said before, this type of video is something that I never really wanted to make, even though I have been getting requests after requests to make a video like this so that you guys can get to know me a little bit better. Now, the topic is how did I get into the trucking industry? And honestly, it's not a secret. I talk about it. I answer questions on my lives all the time. It's just I never really wanted to dedicate a video to it. But today I had a change of heart because sometimes it's nice to hear other people's stories to just compare and contrast. So let's get into it. Ready? Let's go. So first and foremost, let me answer the questions that I keep getting. Some of these questions come from a place of curiosity, which is completely normal. Some people just ask them from a not so great place, but let me answer them anyway. No, I was not born in the United States. I actually moved here in 2009 and became an American citizen somewhere in 2013, 2014. I honestly can't recall. I can't recall what I did yesterday. Second, I went to an American school from grade 1 to grade 12. So yeah, all of my schooling was in an American school with American values, because where I grew up was very different. It was a different culture. But this is why my English is pretty good, I would say, although we all know that I mispronounce things constantly. English is actually my first language, which surprises a lot of people, but that's because my father spoke English to me from the moment I was born. His goal was always to move me out to the US, right? US was everything. It was his dream. But yeah, if you're wondering where the accent is from, well, I wasn't born here, but I did study in an American school. Number 3, I'm half Ukrainian, half Georgian, but I speak neither Ukrainian nor Georgian. I do speak a little bit of French though, not that that helps me much. And finally, no, I'm not a dispatcher. For some reason, people try to use it against me in the comments. Some people, not all of them, of course, but some people try to use it against me in the comments because, and I get it, some dispatchers have earned a bad rep, right? And people use it against me, but I'm of the belief that a good dispatcher is an excellent asset. But no, I am not a dispatcher. I'm actually the co-owner or one of the owners of our 2 trucking companies. And I happen to just dispatch my own trucks as well as doing compliance and other back office stuff. But yeah, I happen to dispatch our own fleet because I don't feel like paying a dispatcher for that when I can do it myself. So a little bit of a backstory. When I came here, I went to university, and while I was studying, I went into retail, specifically bridal. And very quickly, I realized that I simply do not have the patience to deal with bridezillas. And yes, they are all bridezillas. I was also a bridezilla. If something happens to the mind when wedding planning is happening, it kind of short circuits. So no bridezillas for me. Honestly, I always had a hard time dealing with girls when I was younger, women right now. It's hard for me. I was always one of the guys, that's who I was. I was always a tomboy. Men are just easier for me to understand their logic. It's just much simpler. I have a very hard time understanding women a lot of the time. And this is because, yeah, I don't think like a woman most of the time. And this comes from my father's influence in my upbringing. Now, my mother is a very feminine person, but for some reason, it was his influence that kind of, yeah, it makes it very difficult for me to understand. And sometimes it can be really frustrating because I wish I had more friends who were girls. I wish I had more female friends, but it's just difficult. I think a little bit differently, and it just doesn't work a lot of the time, unfortunately. Now, weirdly enough, life pushed me into fashion recruiting, which was my first corporate job, and I was a part of the team that hired talent for brands like Gucci, Bottega Veneta, The Real Real, basically all those luxury brands. And honestly, I am so grateful to have had that job because I learned so much. Primarily, I learned confidence when speaking to other people. I had a really hard time with that, especially people who I did not know. So that taught me a lot. Now, while I was recruiting, my family, who was planning to move to the US but was still living in Europe, they call me up one day and they tell me that we're planning to open a trucking company. And guess who they asked for help? Me. Now, I know I said I was a tomboy, and I am, but when my family told me that they want me to open a trucking company, and I don't mean this in an offensive way at all, but I had the most stereotypically girly reaction. Me, a delicate flower in trucking? You've got to be kidding me. Well, unbeknownst to me, they were, while I was recruiting, having fun with these luxury brands and feeling like on top of the world because I'm in the corporate world. Uh, they were running numbers. They were crunching numbers, learning about the trucking industry in the United States. And when they asked me to open this company, they told me, they promised me that I could be a silent partner and I wouldn't have to do anything. Now, why did they ask me for help? Well, because by that time I was living in the United States for almost 10 years, and they thought that I knew enough to be able to successfully open a trucking company, that I knew the rules and regulations. What they didn't realize is the extent of my lack of knowledge when it comes to running your own business, first of all, and second of all, the trucking industry. I always mention this, and I'm going to mention this again. When I just started and trucking, came on my radar, I did not know that trailers and semi-trucks detach, right? I thought that if you wanted to buy a flatbed trailer, which I didn't know was called a flatbed, you had to make sure to find a truck that has that flatbed attached to it. I really didn't know they were attached, so that tells you how clueless I was. Now, another thing I'm going to admit, and it's pretty embarrassing for me to admit, to be quite honest, knowing what I know now, I used to think of trucks as these annoying big hippos on the road that are just making my day worse. They scared me. They moved slower than the rest of the traffic. And of course, I did not know about the rules and regulations back then. I did not know that semi-trucks and trucks in general have their own speed limit they have to abide by. But yeah, I was pretty naive, stupid, I would say, but that was my reaction, and that's the honest truth. So basically, I was a spoiled brat, an entitled spoiled brat when they asked me to do this, but I was up for the challenge. Now, my first mentor, quote unquote, and I will be grateful to him for the rest of my life, was the gentleman who sold us the truck, our first truck, right? The truck that we pre-ordered. He could spend 1 to 2 hours at a time with me explaining to me what is IFTA, what is IRP, what I have to get in order to pick up the truck, that I need an MC, DOT, I need to pay my UCR, I need to have BOC3, insurance, IFTA, IRP is very, very important, 2290, all of that. Now, of course, I didn't know what he was talking about when he was telling me this, but I was really good at pretending that, yeah, I'm so smart, I understand everything. But in reality, every time we would talk, I would be researching all those terms to try to understand what the heck he was telling me. So after trying to understand this whole thing, I realized I'm pretty useless. So I enlisted the help of Apex Capital that ended up, and this is an authority service provider. Did you hear that mispronunciation? I don't know what to do with it. But yeah, they helped us open our LLC, got our MCDOT numbers, they got UCR for us, they did the 2290 for us, BOC3, state permits. The only thing that they didn't do is like ELDs, all of those things, and insurance. So here I am, one of the owners of this new, beautiful, shiny MC number. And by that time, my business partner, my family member, he was already in the US and he was a new CDL holder. So I'm looking for insurance, and yeah, it was tough because insurance companies didn't want to touch a new CDL holder who is working under a completely new authority. That's a new venture. I think I sat on the phone with various insurance agents for over 2 weeks, constantly, daily, trying to find insurance that would take us on, because without it, I realized already by that time that we do not have an operation without insurance. I can't activate the MC number. And it was a whole mess because I had so many agents working on, our case, that different agents would send our information to one insurance company, and the insurance company would get mad saying that, why are you all sending me this company, this one company? It was just a darn mess. But through this process of trying to find insurance, I did learn about insurance ratings and the importance of insurance ratings. And I remember it was a British gentleman with this sophisticated accent who told me, you have to pay attention to insurance ratings because brokers will not work with anyone who is not A or B rated, and forget about risk retention groups. He told me about the website AM Best to check the ratings. But basically, fast forward, I did end up finding a wonderful agent who we're still with today, 4 years later, for both our companies, who found insurance that was A-rated, and that gave us a pretty decent price considering that we were a completely new MC in DOT with a new CDL holder. It was something like $24,000 per year. Now, throughout this whole process of getting the documents together and insurance and everything, all of a sudden I learned that there is going to be a new entrant audit, and I learned about compliance, right? So me having this goody-goody two-shoes complex, I can't call it any other way, and me being competitive, I became obsessed with compliance. We have to be the perfect carrier and we have to win. Now, what competition we were in, I still cannot tell you, but we had to win no matter what. So then the calls to the FMCSA and the California Department of Transportation started. And there was this gentleman in the California DOT. His name was Jesus. I'll never forget him because he was the one who always picked up the phone. And I had so many questions for him about compliance because, again, I was trying to be perfect, right? I didn't know who he was. Maybe he was going to be the CHP officer who was going to do our new entrant audit. I actually have no idea who he was, but he was always the one picking up the phone. And for, I think it was 1.5, 2 weeks straight, I would call him pretty much on a daily basis with a list of questions on compliance. Do we need this? And how do I pass the new entrant audit? Do I need the road test? What about the entry-level driver certificate? My God, I had so many questions. And I remember my last conversation with him. It was really embarrassing, but it makes for a funny story. I called him the last time. He picks up the phone. It's always Jesus. So he picks up the phone. And I am chipper because, again, I want to make a good impression on the guy. And I tell him, I'm like, hey, Jesus, it's Miranda. And then there's silence on the other end. And then I hear, oh, he was so damn fed up with me and my questions. But again, I needed answers and I got them. Anyway, fast forward to the very first load I had to book. By that time, I realized I'm not going to be a silent partner because I got very interested in compliance, right? Or obsessed. So the first load I had to book, I was terrified. I get emails all the time from new dispatchers saying that I'm terrified of calling brokers, and I get it. I was in that position as well. I was terrified because I knew from my research that brokers talk really, really fast and they use lingo that I don't yet understand. And I just knew for a fact that I am about to embarrass myself. Well, the first load I ended up booking was with TQL from California. And when the guy was telling me about the load, I actually interrupted him and I told him, just to clear the air, I'm like, I'm new, so I'm really sorry if I'm very slow in understanding what you're saying. Now, thankfully, the broker told me that it's actually his second day on the job and this is a new job for him. He was a new broker, so he was also nervous, which worked out perfectly. So there we were, not knowing anything about anything, but pretending like we know everything about the business and pretending like we're the coolest business people out there. Now, that was the moment. The moment I booked that first load was the moment I was hooked. Now, on a more serious note, I consider myself extremely lucky because of how my experience shaped out to be, right? So we're a family-owned company. So in the beginning, it was just me running back office, dispatching, making sure everything's compliant. And my family member, my business partner, was the one driving. And every single day, I heard about the difficulties on the road, the difficulties of dealing with rude shippers and receivers, the difficulties of dealing with other drivers who can be ruthless sometimes, road conditions, DOT officers, the fact that you have to sleep in this tin can for a month, 2 months at a time sometimes. So yeah, I would say opening or starting a trucking company with a family member who you talk to every single day really opens up your eyes to the realities, because so many people who sit behind their computer and don't drive are kind of detached from the reality of things. One thing I have learned very quickly from the get-go is that while I was having a ton of fun talking to brokers and booking freight in the beginning, there was this whole other side that was instrumental, the person who is actually operating the vehicle. And the things you go through driving that truck are often horrific. They're often dangerous, often lonely and heartbreaking, right? How many more adjectives can I use? Basically, it was through this experience, which is ongoing. I speak to my business partners, both of whom drive on a daily basis. So I hear these horror stories constantly. I hear the mental state. I hear the difficulties of consistently staying in this truck, sleeping in that tin can, and not being able to do something else, live. That is the experience that taught me to have the utmost respect for truckers. Now, I have to admit, I do yell at my husband constantly when he's making a lane change in front of a semi truck. I tell him to keep his distance because that guy or girl behind the wheel is not going to have enough time to brake. Don't make them brake. It's hard to do that. And whenever I see a truck of any kind, it doesn't have to be a semi truck, that's trying to make a lane change in front of me, one of the things I will always do, no matter how late I am, is I will always let them through, because nobody else does. No one else has the respect for the person behind the wheel, just like I used to not have respect for the person behind the wheel. I had to go through all of this and hear it from my family members to actually understand that, yeah, it's a tough job. And these are people who are keeping everything moving. Without them, there would be nothing. Anyway, fast forward to 2021, or actually the end of 2021, when my other family member came from Europe to the US finally. And we decided to open a second carrier, so a second trucking company. My apologies, a second MC number, DOT number, and everything. Why? Well, I can't tell you how many people on this channel think that I'm doing something super shady. Why do I need 2 trucking companies? You know, I must be up to no good. Happy to explain it. The reason is insurance. My business partner who came in 2021, he had 20 years, or actually over 20 years of experience with a CDL, but it was in Europe. So here he was considered brand new, a brand new CDL holder, and our original company's insurance at that time did not accept him as a brand new CDL holder because the European CDL is non-transferable to the US. So we had a choice to make. Number one is we're going to open a completely separate trucking company just for him. We would still be the same business partners. We would get a different MC, DOT. We would use a different insurance that would insure him as a new CDL holder so that we could avoid raising the rates for all of our trucks under the original company. Because if we were to change that insurance to accept him as a new CDL holder in the United States under our original company, we would have to keep that rate for all of our trucks. Or he would have to drive a couple of years for another carrier to kind of season his CDL, and then he would be able to work in his own company because he's a business partner. So obviously we chose option number one, and we opened a separate company that's completely separate. Now, it was also around that time that I started thinking about YouTube together with my business partners, but we had, not that it was different goals in mind, we just had a different view of what YouTube should be. My business partners thought YouTube would be a great way to find new people to add to our team. And I agreed with that, but I also wanted to provide value, right? I wanted to teach people about the trucking industry. As I said before, maybe I didn't mention this, it was quite a learning curve for me to learn about trucking coming from where I came from. I was completely out of that industry. So it was very difficult. So many rules, so many regulations, so many new words that you have to learn. And I just wanted to be able to help people whose shoes I was in just a couple of years before understand the industry so that it's easier for them than it was for me. Now, obviously, just like everything else in life, YouTube went a completely different direction, right? It became more of a freight market, trying to survive the current industry, understanding what is driving the freight market, survival mode kind of channel. And I have to say, I have learned more in the 2 years that I have been doing YouTube than I have just running my own 2 trucking companies. And in part, it's because of you guys, because you teach me every single day. In part, it's because when you're trying to teach someone and you're trying to teach them in a way they will understand, where it's easy to digest, you have to understand it. So you have to learn it and know it like the back of your hand, right? So basically, when you're trying to teach, you learn a lot yourself. So yeah, guys, that's a little story about me and how I got in. You take away from this whatever it is you take away. I knew nothing of the industry, and honestly, neither did my business partners, at least not of the industry in the United States, right? It's very different. It's a very different animal than the trucking industry in Europe. But we're still here 4 years later, still rolling and surviving even the current market conditions. Yeah, it's spicy and ouchy, but we're here, we're surviving. The point is, nothing is impossible. As long as we're learning from our mistakes, we're learning and open to hearing others' opinions. We're going to sometimes fall flat on our faces, right? But we have to keep moving in some direction. So when people in the comments tell me to get out of this industry, honestly, I love that comment. I'm being sarcastic, obviously. Now, that is one of the only comments that will get under my skin, except for the OnlyFans comment, which really pisses me off. But when people tell me to get out of this industry, I will always reply, I will not get out. And the only thing I can compare it to, I think all of us at one point or another had a list of what we wanted to see in our future life partner, right? Husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. I know I did, right? Check marks. This is what he needs to look like. This is what he needs to like. This is what he needs to be into. This is how he has to dress. I had that list. And sometimes, even though you have that list, you end up falling head over heels for someone you would never have expected, right? So that's pretty much the story of me in the trucking industry. The trucking industry is something that I never even considered, but it ended up being one of the big loves of my life, except for my family, of course. Anyway, guys, enough of that. On Friday, I promise I'll get back to the market updates and forecasts, and we will continue learning from here on out. I just wanted to make a little bit of a different video just to kind of create a distraction for you guys, for a lack of a better word. I mean, talking about the market constantly and about how crappy everything is, it can weigh on you, right? It does on me, and I'm sure it does on you. I see it in the comments sometimes. So yeah, but we'll get back to learning, I promise. I'm not going to make videos like this every single time. This is the one and only video like this. But yeah, wishing you a safe rest of your week. Stay resilient, keep learning, and I will see you in the next video.